Hi, guys. Welcome back to That's All, folks. Today we've got Eileen Tracey, writer, director, and script editor, and we've got Fey Vercuiel, UX designer. I'll allow them to sort of introduce themselves and go into it in a little bit more depth. So why don't we start with you, Fey? Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience in UX design and, who you are, where you're from, maybe?
So yeah, my name is Fey Vercuiel. My pronouns are she, her. I've been working in the games industry for about 18 years. I've worked on lots of AAA games and mobile, and started off my career working in web. Mostly like very large projects like Assassin's Creed, Halo, Total War, and recently, last 3 years, Candy Crush, which I know is a very sort of big household name. About me as a person, I'm disabled. I have autism and ADHD, and I also struggle with a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So it's like a connective tissue disorder, which influences a lot like my how I like experience the world through like chronic pain and things like that.
Oh, wow.
But it's I love the violin and I love sailing, and like that's a big part of my life.
I love that.
Yeah.
Before we dive into that, I just want to, like, for my own sake, it doesn't even need to be for the listeners out here, but you have a very interesting background of like where you're from and the languages that you speak. So you grew up in South Africa.
Yeah, in South Africa. And
Nice.
then when I was very young, I moved to Bulgaria, where I met my partner. We're still together for 23 years and stayed there for a decade, where I worked in different game companies like Ubisoft. And then for the last 8 years, I've been in the UK, and it's been really lovely. I actually just applied for my citizenship. So
Congrats.
I'm waiting for that notification so I can, go to the ceremony and just get my passport. Yeah.
That's so exciting. Yeah. Did you live in Sofia, Bulgaria, or?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
It's a beautiful town. I do miss it a lot, but I think, since moving to London and living here, it's just been so nice because it's a very diverse city and there's lots of people.
And what languages do you speak again? I know that you mentioned you speak around 4 languages.
Oh, Afrikaans, English, Bulgarian, and a few others.
So do you pick up these languages when you move to these locations?
Yeah, I just because I have like really like obsessive tendencies with like my ADHD. I do hyperfixate on things and get obsessed with them. So I think that translates into the work I do. So
yeah, I bet. How specifically do you think that has, I guess, informed your work or been beneficial for the work that you do within UX design?
It's tricky being a neurodivergent person in games, because like it's kind of like a blessing and a curse. A blessing in the sense that like I think differently and I kind of I'm able to solve creative problems, but then there's also a lot of challenges that come with that, because I guess just part of my introduction, I guess, would be that I'm both autistic and I have ADHD, so it comes with some difficulties, but
yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
That's why I'm so nervous right now.
Oh, no, don't. We're all nervous. We're all just like putting up fronts all the time. That's how we walk through life, but we're all just like screaming inside. And Eileen's laughing and nodding.
I'm screaming. Yeah.
So let's just jump to you for a second. Can you tell us a little bit about, your writing, directing, and script editing and where you're from and your backstory a little bit?
Yeah. So writer-director from Northern Ireland, grew up in Northern Ireland. Originally born in South Africa, got a Latvian Lithuanian mother and an Irish father. In terms of my writing and directing, I have been like very fixated on being a director since I was a child, watching music videos on Kerrang TV channel, got obsessed. And then I discovered like Steve McQueen when I was in my teens, and then decided I want to be an avant-garde art filmmaker. And so just, taking myself really, really seriously. And then I've made some dramatic shorts. They did pretty well. And I, during the pandemic, moved into comedy because life was so difficult and depressing that I was like, you know what? I can't sit here and work on these really, really difficult scripts anymore. I need to laugh. So now I'm currently working on some comedy projects. And then alongside the writing and directing, I script edit for a group of just different writers and production companies, which I absolutely love.
Okay, and I really want to unpack that a little bit as well, because personally, I've done some script editing in the past, and it can be so much fun and such a learning process as well as a writer. Do you prefer script editing to writing, directing, or do they all sort of fall along the same plane?
So that's a really good question. I think with script editing, I love the part of it that like you're helping someone else to make their work and make their work better and tell their story. I love that. And one of the reasons I love it is because I'm also not under the microscope. Whereas with writing and directing, it's so personal. It's so raw. You're so on the line being like, this is me. Do you like it? Do you enjoy it? That I think with script editing, there's that thing where you're focused on someone else and helping them tell their story. Whereas, yeah, I find writing my own stuff so personal and so difficult. And I think as a writer, maybe everybody does this, but the process of the first draft, which is always terrible, and then the second draft was just, not what you want it to be at all. And then going through it and like every time I write something, I'm like, you're terrible. You can't. Oh my goodness. Why do you even try? And then by the end, sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, this is good.
Do you find that script editing allows you to be a little bit more easy on yourself with your own writing, because you can see, because obviously when you're script editing, you're trying to be as compassionate but also as honest as possible with the writers. And does that sort of change your perspective on your own writing? How has that sort of shaped it?
Yeah, 100%. I think because I've worked with some brilliant writers, some really talented people, and it's just, you realize how important the process is. Because I think before script editing, before working in development, I was kind of like, you imagine these geniuses who just write something and it's just done and it's polished and they're like, here you go. And then when you're script editing, you realize it's just, you regurgitate something onto the page. It's on the page, and then so much of it is in the development and the moving around and the making it work and the refining and the making sure it comes across. And I think, yeah, it does really, really help you see like writing the process and also how each writer works so differently. So I think, yeah, it definitely has been very helpful. And there's nothing better for your writing as well than reading a lot of scripts.
Are there any specific things, or general things, I should say, across writing that you think elevates a writer's work?
I think research is really important. I don't think we put enough emphasis on research. Having an ear for dialogue as well. I will say a note I give all the time is to give each character their own distinct voice. So an ear for dialogue, when you find a writer who just has that, it's amazing. But you can obviously learn that. And I do think having experience in other departments in film is so good for writing for screen, because, like you get new writers, sometimes they'll write something that's crazy big budget, it's like explosions, or they'll write a lot of stuff that you can't see on the screen that is more prosaic and like suited to a novel. So I think, yeah, it's just writing is experience. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just to sort of round this up and bring it back to Fey for a second, I have thought a little bit about how, writers are writing for a target audience, but then also writing for themselves, which is probably a little bit of a hard balance. And for gaming, you're only working for a target audience. Isn't that right? Or would you also say that it's also creating a game for your own personal creative pleasures?
It's a mix of both. And I think you have to find that balance between leaning on your own creative experience, but also understanding that you're building a product for an audience that you have to empathize with and understand. So with a lot of work that I do in UX design and UX research is that we do a lot of qualitative studies. We do lots of interviews with our customers, our gamers, and we try to establish some kind of persona for who we're building the software for. So yeah, I don't know, I can expand on that, but it's definitely an important thing to empathize with our players and understand who we're making the software for. But you shouldn't sacrifice your creative integrity at the same time. So we're always walking that tightrope of creativity versus building something that people are asking for, you know?
How did you get into game design? What's been your sort of, I guess, I know this is a big question, so feel free to answer it how you like, but how did you get to getting into games and UX design in the first place?
Very unconventional, actually. I wanted to work in entertainment. So when I was younger, I actually trained formally to be a character animator for a film. But I was in South Africa at the time, and there's not much of an industry there. So I built when I studied 3D graphics and animation, I built South Africa's largest forum for CG artists and things like that. And from there, I realized I really love web design and I love making like platforms and experiences for people. So I got really into user interface design. And after moving to Bulgaria, I got a very unique opportunity to build some Flash software back in the day when Flash was still a thing. Most people nowadays don't even know what that is.
I have no idea. Can you please tell me what Flash is?
You can thank Steve Jobs for that. But it was just everyone had Flash Player on their browser, and you would like have very nice, rich experiences. And there was a lot of like fidelity with what you were designing. So everything looked really beautiful. But I just got tired of websites. And then one day a friend of mine was like, you should apply for Ubisoft. And I got a job basically just learning like overnight, like how to use After Effects and like, Adobe software and things like that. Sent my reel and got the job somehow. So I worked on Assassin's Creed for a while. And what's strange is like, UI has always been seen as like this just purely an artistic craft. But as the industry has matured, players' psychology, behavioral science has become more important. And another craft has diverged from that, which is UX design. I find that I love both. So I dabble in both worlds. So I have like my creative side where I do a lot of graphic design, layouts, things like that. Like I obsess about typography and small details. But then on the other side, I love like digging deep into understanding our players and just, getting to know them and empathizing with them in such a way that I can design rich and beautiful experiences for them. Mm-hmm. So I kind of stumbled into it, to be honest. There's this running joke that if you're a UI UX designer in games, you have the most software licenses in the company because you're just like touching everything. And I think that's perfect for how my brain works. I get bored very quickly. So I just jump around and like get really hooked on specific things that I do.
Before I sort of jump into the personal questions, I just wanted to say that I feel like both of you have touched upon a little bit on how research is super important in both of what you guys are doing. And, as a creative myself, I understand how much research has to go into all of the different writing and the different games that you're doing and the behavioral psychology on both fronts. Super important. Jumping in further to sort of psychology and a person's own psyche, have you guys had any personal experiences that have maybe shaped or influenced the stories that you tell, either in your stories or in the products that you design?
I personally don't think you can kind of make something without bringing in your personal experience, but I think that's just maybe the way I work. I don't know if you're the same. I think like audiences can sniff out like inauthenticity or, I think a real thing that we see these days is where, like big studios are making films and they're like, we're gonna cater to the youth. And they're like, what are the youth into these days? We'll just do that. And it's that sort of like, speaking down to people. Whereas I think you need to tell a story that you understand and that you can authentically tell. I don't know, it's not a personal story per se, but yeah, I think I try to make sure everything has honesty and authenticity in it.
Do you guys feel like this is a huge debate that I've had with some creatives that I know about whether you have to have your own personal experience to write about something or share something? What is your take on that, guys?
I mean, everything we do is informed by our personal experiences. But it's when I'm making a game and designing for it, like I kind of always try to put my mind in the context of who's the viewer, who's the audience. I don't know, like it's something that just kind of happens.
I sort of like, it made me think automatically of like, the question people have been asking a lot, and I feel like there's no good answer to like, can a straight actor play a gay role? That sort of thing. Like, and I feel like, oh, I don't want to speak on this, but it's like very, very complicated because I think we used to live in like a world where it was sort of like, we just have these like straight white men in Hollywood telling every single type of story. And now we've opened it up and we're telling all these other types of stories, but we're not always letting the people whose experience it is tell those stories.
Exactly.
But then you also can't restrict people and be like, no, you could only make a film or a game about your specific
100%.
experience. You can only speak on what you've lived.
And that's where the research comes in, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like interviewing people and understanding, how this story has been shaped by this person's experience.
Yeah, I think it definitely differs when you're a writer or a director because you're kind of the one who's behind the narrative. Whereas, I mean, when I'm designing an experience for a game, yes, we consider the narrative, but we're not the owners of that narrative. So I feel, we just have to be sure that we maintain that integrity and sort of balance the needs of what the product wants to do versus what the business needs.
Yeah.
And it's a tightrope. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't realize it was so scientific and like, it was like, it's a narrative, it's a story, but I guess you really do need to stay within these lines, but make it in this way that really appeals to people, will engage people. And, you can watch a film for like 90 minutes, 2 hours, but for a game, you got to lock people in. They got to be like invested.
Yeah, the thing is like, if you're building, for example, UI for film, there's much more of a narrative element. And it's actually one of my obsessions, I could say, that I love to study how UI is used in film as a storytelling device, how technology is used as a form of telling stories. And what I try to do in my work is I try to bridge that with games. And it's very difficult because at the end of the day, when you're making a game, it's all about building something usable, something functional, something engaging. The sort of narrative aspect is difficult to merge there. Everything on film has to look sexy. It has to look, really good. And at the same time, it has to for games as well. But like, it's kind of like you can think of the two contrasts. If you're using a website, it just has to work. If you're watching a film, it has to like really immerse you in the narrative. Games is like right in the middle.
Yeah, it has to work and look good.
And look good, yeah. And that's really difficult and challenging. So
have there been any sort of other challenges outside of the work itself that you've sort of faced within the industry of, UX design and gaming?
Challenges such as?
I don't know. I mean, we're all women, right?
Yeah.
Working probably in big corporations with mostly 90%, white men. I feel like that's been a challenge for me as a creative on set sometimes. So I'm wondering if you guys have faced similar challenges within the industries that you work in.
Yeah, I mean,
especially gaming, because it's supposedly like, a man's world, so to say.
I mean, that's always been sort of the way that the public looks at games. There's been some surveys done in the UK about like, diversity surveys to see how like what does the makeup look like in games, and we have like almost like half or more. I don't know exactly the exact numbers of gamers are women. People who make games, like up to 30% or more, are neurodiverse. So there's this real aspect of like diversity there, but at the same time, the games industry as it is today is becoming much more corporate. It's becoming much more money driven. I don't know if you've been following the news in games, but there's been like mass layoffs for the last 2 years, and like thousands and thousands of people lost their jobs. And a lot of that is based on, people who are in very high positions, like not considering that the people that they're firing are usually those in lower positions that are, underrepresented and struggling. So there's that aspect to it. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, but like I know in film, there was the strikes last year, and a lot of people struggling to get work, and often the people who, I don't know, struggle the most tend to be those who are underrepresented.
Yeah, 100%. I think with the strikes and everything, and I'm sure they'll continue and they'll come back. It's just obviously with the streamers and everything, just the distribution of pay is like, with film, it's shocking. I don't know, I guess like as an industry, games has more money, but obviously I didn't know about those layoffs. So maybe it is similar, where I think there's a lot of taking advantage of people and sort of, it's Hollywood. You want to work here for free? You'll do it for free. It's like, expected to do unpaid internships and things like that. Like it's still under the radar because now it's illegal, but it still goes on.
Yeah, those are all big challenges that I feel like we are all facing in different sort of creative pockets of where we're working. But has there been any sort of like personal challenges that you as a human being has had to overcome, and how did you overcome that? Because I guess like as creatives, we're fighting our way to get our voice out there,
I guess like there's quite a few. I think in terms of like maybe like when I first started in the film industry, I came out of my undergrad and I was so excited and I was like ready to go. And I was in my early 20s and it was so sexist. This was way back. This was 2013, 14. So like pre-Me Too. I was in Northern Ireland. I had like a fun time, and not every set was like this. I'm not speaking for every set, but it was really sexist, and like just wee things as well as bigger things. Like I remember one guy coming up to a colleague of mine and going, because she was working in production design, and he said, "Wouldn't you rather be working in a nail salon?" And just stuff like that.
Oh my God.
Like, what? I am trying to do my job here. And there was some stuff that was like, yeah, much worse than that. That just I found so like, you dream of doing this your whole life, and then you get there and like there's these stumbling blocks in the way that it's like, I don't know how to overcome them. So I actively chose, maybe it wasn't the best idea, but I actively chose to like stop working in the film industry until I was closer to 30, so that I could be more like empowered and like stronger and like able to stand up to this kind of thing. So I then went into like film distribution and worked in that for like 5 years, just for a little break. But by the time I came back to film, Me Too had happened, which was incredible and really changed things. Obviously, more things need to change, but it was monumental.
Yeah, in terms of like personal challenges, I think like I love playing video games, and that's the reason why I'm in video games. So I didn't train to become a game developer. I just kind of fell into it. And I've always tried to keep my focus on that. And I feel like as I've climbed the corporate ladder and as I've like gotten more and more experienced, it's become more about the business side and less about like the fact that I just want to make great games. So the personal challenge for me there is navigating that, how do I stay authentic? How do I bring my full self to work while still understanding that I'm working for a big business? And I think regardless of whether you're working in film or games, that's a really tough thing to do. And then I feel like as I've now stepped into more manager roles, like, I've worked managing design departments of like over 20 people, you have to put up a wall, a mask. You have to basically perform you can't always be yourself. You can't always speak your mind. So
Have you tried to speak your mind before and then sort of been like struggled against?
No, I mean, like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like, everyone says that you should, bring your full self and be authentic and be vulnerable. But then the moment you do that, you realize that you're actually putting yourself in a very difficult position. And with autism, there's this concept of masking where you're kind of like putting up this this barrier in performing and trying to be someone else just so you can survive the day. And that's fine. But then the personal challenge for me comes with when I end the workday and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if you relate to that at all, but it's
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because I feel like, I don't know if you guys experience this at school, but we're all creatives, right? And so at school, the creative people, at least in my high school, were like the drama kids and like the art kids. And you were a little bit like wild and out there and maybe a little bit wacky. And then you expect the industry to sort of like be like that too, to be filled with people who are a little bit, different from the normal robotic sort of corporate people, right? And then you're still facing these issues where you can't be your authentic self, but then you're being told it's almost like a buzzword. I guess has it been challenging for you guys to input some of that authenticity into your creativity, or do you find that you're almost fueling your creative projects with your authenticity and honesty because you're unable to show it in the real world?
I think I've really had to learn how to be professional. I feel like I feel like I showed up being like, here I am. And then like I had a manager once who was like, play the game. And I was like, no. And now I'm like, oh, I don't want to play the game. But to some extent you have to put on a performance, be like, I'm a functional person. Like, I think like with creativity, you've got like your mind runs wild and you're like, think maybe a little bit differently. So then you have to rein yourself in and behave professionally in a professional setting, which is quite tough. I had a partner once who worked in a law firm and he would wear like a suit to work. And that was like work person.
Right.
And then outside of work, he'd always wear t-shirts and he was like, that's because I'm two different people. And I like could not get my head around
like
that.
Like he's playing a role.
Yeah. It's like, this is lawyer me and this is outside of work me. Whereas I feel like that to me is just too much. But
I guess we're all playing roles, right? All the time. I think about that all the time. Like you're playing a role when you're with your parents, when you're at work, when you're with your friends. But it's like how far can you go before it becomes a different person?
Yeah.
And
like you can sense that when people are just performing.
Yeah.
It's like, give me more. Like give me some of you.
Yeah.
So I think the balance is so important.
Yeah. Eileen, I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about one of your projects, A Particular Friend. It's based on conversion therapy. And I personally don't know much about conversion therapy. So I was wondering if you could like maybe expand a little bit on that project.
Yeah, sure. So this project I originally pitched as my graduation film for my master's, and then COVID hit and we couldn't do anything with intimacy because of the rules. So that's very sad. But basically conversion therapy, because I grew up in such a homophobic place, I was very interested in, a lot of my work is about unlearning shame. And I really enjoy, as I said earlier, research. So I met with victims of conversion therapy to, find out about the process and speak to them about their experiences. And weirdly, the first person I interviewed was my sister's ex-boyfriend from high school. And he'd been through conversion therapy while we were all in high school. And it was shocking. It's basically like, they used to do it with electroshock therapy and that kind of stuff. But now it's all like psychological, just mind games and torture of just trying to make you think that like you are gay because your mother was overbearing, you're gay because your father was absent. Like they can always find a reason, and it's sort of it's like it's torture, it's awful. But yeah, so I met with victims of conversion therapy, and then from that I made a narrative. And one of the things I thought was really interesting was that there's a really significant amount of priests in the Catholic Church who go into it because it's a safe, quote unquote, safe space to be gay, because you never have to like explain why you don't have a wife or why you're not dating girls because I'm a priest.
Right. Interesting. That makes, I was actually going to try to tie it into sort of religion and ask whether there were a lot of your interviewees, I guess, were they religious and had to go to conversion therapy because they were almost forced into it from, family members?
So my sister's ex-boyfriend actually took himself there voluntarily, which I found so difficult. And he was so open and amazing and shared so much about it. But yeah, I think even if you're not religious, because my parents wouldn't be religious, but we grew up so surrounded by religion that like you feel it. Like I went to church for a few years and I'm still unlearning that shame. So I can't imagine being like a little child.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you
in
mentioned
church.
this, but this is a short film, or
Yeah.
that's the wonderful thing about short films in general. You get to touch upon these like really interesting topics. I feel like with games, we do a lot of rehashing of like big IP stories. The same, I guess, with Hollywood, where we talk about things like that. And yeah, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but like, yeah, it's interesting how like that same dichotomy exists between AAA, which is like an acronym used for big titles in games, and the indie scene. And yeah, having joined an indie studio now, it's really nice. I mean, we're still like building a game that's for a specific audience and a specific type of thing, but it's just really cool that you get to like talk about these stories that are very important. Like it's a heavy topic, like very heavy.
Do you have hopes to create stories like that within gaming as well? Is
Oh,
that
I'd love to. Like, I even would love to one day make games about like different disabilities, because like as someone who is disabled, I and someone who designs software that tries to make software more accessible, like I think about like no one makes games for blind people, for example. Can I make a game without any visuals, just sound input, and see what we can do? So
Is that something that you guys are researching at the moment
oh
specifically?
no, this is just me
This is just
dreaming into the sky, like hoping I can do that one day. Like I really think that there's so many fun experiences you can build, and we don't tell enough daring stories. But because it's now easier than ever to make video games, there's a lot of people telling a lot of important stories. You just have to like open up your Steam library and you'll see like there's lots and lots of amazing games, but they're small budget. It's always small budget. I would love to see big companies touching upon these more difficult topics.
Has there been a game that you've worked on that you particularly loved working on that maybe did touch upon a little bit of the heavy subjects?
Oh no,
Not yet. Okay.
not yet.
Getting there slowly.
No, I think it's just like proportionate to the budget, right? Like if you work on a big budget title, you know, people play it safe.
Yeah.
And that's always there are sometimes breakthroughs, and sometimes there's, you know, really interesting things that happen. Like they'll have like a female protagonist or something like that. But then with how the industry works, then they'll only launch that specific version of the build in one country, but then in a country where it's illegal or something's like not fitting right, they would like not publish it there. So I'm just like not keen on that. But
yeah, that's I guess the same in film as well. You know, some countries will sort of blacklist specific films. Well, do you have any aspirations similarly to the question that I just asked Fey within writing and directing, like maybe a project that you really want to create in the future?
Loads of projects. Yeah, I feel like I've got, there's a few things that are like, you know, in my head that I'm like, when I'm ready to write that, and I don't feel quite ready yet. At the moment, I'm working with a production company on a comedy series that, will it be greenlit? I don't know, but it's about something that's really important to me that I think it's like how for women or people who identify as women, the only thing like landmarks we really celebrate, and maybe this is more an Irish thing, but weddings, babies. And I'm like, can we open it up and look at like celebrating women's accomplishments in general, and like, will you only feel like an accepted and valuable woman if you're married and you have a baby? What if you don't want those things? And I think like for me, film and TV, a lot TV mostly is like really exciting because we can present different ways to live. And like, I think visibility is so important. And I think seeing things in media helps you to understand them and accept them. And I would really like us to offer alternative lifestyles on TV that overwrite these like really strict, boring narratives that we have for like the way women should live, the way people should live, the way we're all meant to see accomplishments.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think kind of what you touched upon, I feel like creating your own short films is such a like beautiful avenue to do that. writing a TV show and trying to get that pitched is like a whole other ball game. How have you found that process to be like so far?
Oh my God, it's really tough. I feel like what I've learned in this process is don't trust anything till there's a contract and you've signed it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. It's kind of the same in my creative field as well. I'm also actor, filmmaker, writer, and you can't really trust anything until it is in contract. It's such a difficult creative industry to be in because there's so many promises, right? And then you're like, but if it's not happening, it's not happening, you know? Yeah. You're not on set on the day, then it's not happening. Even when there is a contract, sometimes I feel like you still can't really get too excited until you're on that set.
Yeah, you know? Yeah. I think that's another thing like I've really learned from this process is like to enjoy the process.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is with games because I guess I assume like you have all this money up front. They're like, we're making this game. We have to make this game. Da, da, da. Whereas I think film, like, because I worked in development as well, development hell is very real. Like you will work on a project, you will fall in love with it, you will work so hard. And then they're like, nah, we're not doing it anymore.
Game development has changed so much in the last couple of years. I think back in the day, like 10 plus years ago, everything was just single hit release titles. So you would work on one thing for like 2 years and nothing changes. Nowadays, people will work on a game for like a few quarters. They'll release like an early version of the game. Someone will cancel it. Or you'd work on a live ops game where like every 2 weeks they would release a new version or some adjustments to the game. So I think it's become much more dynamic.
Are you working on any games within, with, the Oculus sort of lens, the VR games? Have you worked or are you hoping to work on VR games? I feel like those could be really great for, I don't know, mental health benefits in different ways.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do with experimental technology and new technology that comes up like that. But I think we're still so far away. Like we've seen lots of tech companies like Meta and other businesses like investing so much money into VR and then it didn't go anywhere because it was more of like a business trend or a fad or a strategy or things like that. So I do think one day immersive technology, augmented reality, all that stuff will become more prevalent, but we're just not there yet at all. That's been my interpretation. I really hope that like the industry can move away from all these technology fads, like whether it's like AI or whatever else. Like it's really like it really should just be about making great games.
Yeah, and I guess that's AI sort of tying in all of these creative fields, right? Because that's why the strikes happened last year, or that was sort of the instigator for the strikes. And AI within gaming as well, it's going to reshape the entire industry. Do you guys have any sort of worries or concerns about AI taking over your jobs? Or
I mean, this is a heavy topic. No, but it's actually really, really important and difficult and challenging. And I feel like people who aren't as excited about AI are becoming more of a minority now. And people who aren't as excited about it just stay quiet because they fear that like it's not going to resonate with like the business owners that they're in, because everyone's just like drinking this Kool-Aid right now.
Yeah.
And I think I can see it impacting a lot of artists, a lot of sound engineers, but it's just a tool like anything else. And I think like there are very good practical uses for AI in games right now. And I'll give you a wonderful example. We do lots of research studies in games. Like we interview thousands of hours of players. Then you have to hire a whole team of people to just troll through the libraries, finding specific topics and things like that. If I can just have a computer go through, interpret the video, find tag everything for me and like organize everything, that's something a human doesn't have to waste their time on. So that's really useful. Same with like AI, the traditional perception of AI, which is about just fighting against bots and things like that and making more immersive experiences with bots inside games. That's great. Where it becomes a problem is where it's essentially just art theft. Like that's my concern. It's just used as like a gimmick, like a strategic gimmick. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I feel like it can be such a handy tool to sort of progress a lot of different things within the creative field. But then, even just going back to our conversation on how important personal experience is, obviously an AI, a bot, doesn't have those personal experiences to be able to implement that creatively into the stories that they're telling. That's my personal fear, that we won't have these authentic, honest human stories, that they'll become very similar, or they'll sort of lack this human touch that we as humans would probably notice. And would probably affect us on a subconscious level when playing these games or when watching these TV shows, and make us a little bit more robotic. But that's going way into the depths of it. It's my fear.
I think all of it is fine as long as it's not affecting people's livelihoods, and as long as it's not affecting the integrity of the thing that you're trying to build. And I think like a lot of people in both film and games thought that like using these new technologies such as AI would bring all these efficiencies. So they just like started firing people left, right, and center. And like now, like our industry is going to pay for that. The industry is going to shrink. A lot of good people are going to lose their jobs, or have lost their jobs. A lot of friends of mine have lost their jobs. So I think, like, I don't know if you've experienced that in film.
Yeah. Have you felt any sort of direct impact within the companies that you're working with because of AI? I mean, obviously you're a writer, so in that aspect, for sure.
Yeah, it is really scary. I think, I'd say like the industry we're in now, film and TV wise, was not the same industry I grew up with. And I imagine when AI properly kicks in, it's going to be exponentially like, just for the very few, because they won't need certain people. And like, like personal stories written by people, obviously always really, really valuable. But like the fact that the streamers made people sign extras sign contracts that said you can do 1 day of work, we'll pay you for 1 day of work, but now we own your image and we'll edit you into scenes.
That's happened to my partner.
So scary.
Yeah. I mean, she never accepted signing those contracts, but like a lot of extras are like, they do one gig and then they have to sign a contract, then they own your image for like forever.
Which is so exploitative and it's so bad. And like, I just think we're just going to find more and more ways to exploit people that way. So I think for me, I just know a lot of people that lost their jobs in scripted around the writer's strike time. And I think it's the thing of like with AI, it's sort of like, we don't have to pay you. We've got this now and it works for free and it's very sophisticated. So So
I think like just to tie it back to your previous question about VR and everything, it's like you got all these disruptive technologies that are doing great things. The problem is then when you mix it with financial interests, that amazing opportunity to like disrupt and do something amazing gets kind of twisted into something else. So all of these technologies, AI, VR, everything, will have a resurgence one day and will be actually valuable to humans.
Yeah.
But, not today. So I think it will take time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a scary and exciting world, just like I guess anything really is, when you're first being introduced to it for the first time, kind of like, telephones when they were first introduced, or smartphones when they were first introduced. People didn't want to buy a phone. They didn't want to be able to be contacted, but nowadays everyone has them and they're so useful in so many ways, and you don't even really think about the negative effects that a smartphone has. So I guess it might also evolve into that eventually and hopefully enhance our creative potential, because it's taking over the sort of menial jobs that we do on a daily basis, like the ones that we don't want to waste our time on.
But I'd love to not have a phone. So I'm like, this is something I love. Like, but no, I can't survive without a phone, but I'm like, I'd love to get rid of it.
This is a loaded question. If you guys could change one thing within both of your fields, what would that be?
Pay people properly, and nepotism, cancel it. It should be about talent. It should be about drive. Yeah. I think make it fair, pay people properly. And, don't just make it for the upper classes. Everybody should get a go.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
Amen. Bringing it back to religion.
Always.
I think as long as creatives are at the helm and all levels of seniority, you're going to have great experiences. It's when you have more business stakeholders that you lose a bit of that magic. So
Yeah.
I hope that like with all these layoffs happening in the industry that new companies will arise from people who actually know what games are about, and they will, be right at the top and hire great people. And that's my dream.
Yeah,
my
and
wish.
more diverse sort of like people as well, so that we can have diverse
Yeah.
storytelling rather than the same kind of storytelling that's for one target audience.
It just has to, the gameplay has to come first, or the script has to come first, and
Yeah.
not because we want to like make something super efficient or something like that. It's, the product you're making has to be the main like focus, and it's not always the case. So
Yeah.
that's my hope.
Do you feel like mostly the case is just the money at the end of the day?
I mean, for a lot of the industry, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like when games were still a big hype in the early 2000s, it was just about like, how can we make something different? How can we make something new? But now as the market has become saturated, everyone's trying to stand out. And I think that's the problem. It's like you lose a bit of that.
Yeah, you're
magic.
just doing it for,
Yeah.
to get your thing out there rather than actually
Yeah.
make art.
Exactly. Art
yeah.
has to come first.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. All right, we've only got a couple minutes left. So before we sort of round this off, I guess want to, I want you guys to maybe tell a little bit about yourself to the audience in terms of where people can find you, maybe a project you're working on next, and maybe one word about how you would describe yourself as a creative in this world, or how you would want to be remembered as a creative in this world. Yeah, I'll let Eileen, why don't we end with you or start with you?
You can find me on Instagram, Eileen Tracey Film. You can find my website, www.eileentracey.com. And that's all the social media I have.
Get rid of the phone.
Yeah, I don't like my phone. I will be at Glasgow Comedy Festival at the end of May. I don't know when this is going out, but yeah, I'm going to be there. And yeah, I'm just writing at the minute, hoping to make this amazing short film at some point this year with this amazing production company that I don't know if I can name, so I'm not going to name them, but look out for it. And how do I want to be remembered? I think, yeah, I want my work to make people feel like free and not so restricted, and that they have choices, they can live life without like the shame if they're not living up to a certain standard that isn't really their own, if that makes sense.
100%. I think your conversion therapy themed short film as well speaks a lot to that. So I'm excited to see that too. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
And Faye?
I guess I'll start with the end of the question, which is like, how would I like to be remembered? I think I would love to one day make more indie games and be remembered for telling interesting stories. I've always wanted to make an adventure game. I feel like I've worked on every single genre from like action adventure to like MMOs and things like that, and I'd love to one day make an adventure game. I'm too old and jaded for social media. So I have actually deleted all of my social media
Yes.
accounts. But you can find me on LinkedIn. So
We love
Fey
LinkedIn.
Vercuiel.
Can you spell your last name for us?
Vercuiel. But if anyone has any questions about like how to get into like the games industry, doing UI UX, I'm always happy to answer questions.
Well, I'll be hitting you up. Especially about Candy Crush. I was obsessed with that game for 3 years. So thank you for that.
Cheers.
It's been honestly such a pleasure speaking to you guys. I feel like we've had a very robust conversation and really touched upon so many different things, which has just been so lovely. So yeah, I guess that concludes the podcast episode of the day. That's all, folks. Thanks, guys.